Nelson here, and welcome to another edition of Kathleen Cuisine. I am super excited to bring you a recipe that we're going to go ahead and try today. The reason that we're making it is that I had some leftover cheese from, I love cheese, and I didn't really want to be a glutton and to eat the entire tray while I'm in quarantine by myself. So what I thought I would do is I would try and repurpose this really amazing cheese that I found earlier this week and see if we can't make a really awesome Brie mac and cheese with pancetta. So what I have here today is I have some Brie that was left over. This is actually a really delicious cheddar parm, and if you've ever tried any of the blends of cheese, they're really delicious, and this is a cheddar dill. And so I'm going to repurpose some of the stuff that I had lying around and make it a really interesting blend of soft Brie with a little salty pancetta and see how it goes. Okay, so let's talk about the ingredients that we're going to use today. No, we're not going to use the Pacifico actually in our cooking today, but it's a really important part of what we're doing. So of course we talked about the leftover cheese that I had, which I wanted to use. Because this is Brie mac and cheese, I thought I should get a little bit more. So I actually have an extra wedge of cheese. So all told, about a half a pound of Brie cheese. Pancetta. So if you haven't cooked with pancetta, pancetta is it's very similar to bacon or pork belly or what have you, where it's high fat content, very salty, and it's absolutely delicious. So we're going to add that as our kind of our salty flavor to the creaminess of the cheese. I have some milk here. I estimated about a cup and 3/4. So we'll kind of see how it goes in the pan and figure out exactly how much we're going to use. We have flour for thickening. We have butter. And then we have salt and pepper. One thing I did want to point out is that when I cook, I don't use typical iodized salt. The reason being is that salt's really not that good for you, but if you're going to use salt, and I love salt, you might as well use salt that actually brings value. And so what I like to do is I look for different sea salts that especially this one's Himalayan, and it has a lot of really extra a lot of good minerals in it that are good for the body. So a couple things that I look for is like magnesium and zinc and those types of things. You can actually get value from salt versus anything that you can get with iodized salt. So if you're going to cook with salt, be creative, but look for things that are actually going to be better for you than just eating salt alone. What I have some macaroni here that I pre-cooked. When you're cooking macaroni and cheese, it's okay to use so shells are actually really popular because it actually holds sauce, and because we're doing macaroni and cheese, we're using the elbow because it actually captures cheese and sauce really good. Another thing that we're going to do is I actually saved some pasta sauce or pasta water from when I cooked the pasta. The reason being is that the water from pasta water helps bind the ingredients that you're cooking onto the pasta. So there's a bit of pasta water that I'll be using as part of this recipe. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by peeling the rind off of the Brie. And the key to getting the rind off of the Brie is a couple things. One of it, it's a lot easier when it's cold. And B, it's a lot easier when you use a serrated edge knife. And this knife that I have has just a tiny bit of serration to it. So basically, not unlike what you would do with peeling an apple, you're just going to take the rind, and actually the sawing motion allows you to bring the thinnest amount of the rind off without actually cutting too much into the cheese. So as you can see here, I'm using a back and forth sawing motion with a serrated edge knife, and the rind is coming off just nicely without taking too much of the cheese off. So we're going to go ahead and peel that back. Okay, now that I have the rind off the cheese, I'm breaking the cheese up a little bit so that it's a lot easier for the melting process, because you want the cheese to sort of melt. If you put the whole thing in, it's not going to melt as evenly, so we're going to cut it up into smaller chunks and so that the melting process of the cheese goes down a little bit easier. And that right there, in some people's opinion, is dinner. But in this particular case, it is going to be an accoutrement to our dinner as we make mac and cheese. Oh, camera's on. All right, so now we're ready to start the cooking process. As I mentioned before, this is pancetta, and we're gonna fry it up just like you would any slice of bacon that you would use. So we're just gonna go ahead and stick that in there and get it cooked up nice and not to a point where it's crispy, just a point where you kind of get the flavors out. So keep in mind, pancetta is actually smoked, so what we're trying to do is really bring the smokiness and the flavor out of it, and we're gonna cook it not till it's crispy, but just until a point where it is, the flavors are drawn off, some of the fat has been burned off, so that we can continue the cooking process. All right, we just about rendered our pancetta, and honestly, how cool is this? Literally, this is bacon, but look at how much fat it produced. Not very much, which is, in my mind, not bad, right? It's kind of healthy, if you ask me. So what we're gonna do, we got about a 1/4 cup of butter. We're gonna go ahead and stick that in there and melt that down. I probably should have cut the butter up into smaller chunks, but it is closer to room temperature, so I can still get it down without burning the butter. But here's the important part. I'm gonna go ahead and you can use cream in your macaroni and cheese. I don't have cream, so I'm actually using milk in it. So I'm going to go ahead and pour the milk. And you want to make sure that your heat's not too high. You shouldn't want to scald the butter or the milk. So you kind of want to make sure that it's at a manageable heat. So I've got it probably about a medium, not medium high, not medium low, just right around the medium, so I can make sure that I can render the bacon with the cream without actually burning the milk or the butter that's in there. So the next step that I want to do is I want to add some seasoning to it. So as I mentioned, I've got some Himalayan sea salt, so I'm going to go ahead and add that into my sauce. So really what we're doing is we're making the cheese sauce, if you will. Adding some salt in there, adding some pepper in there, and then we're gonna go ahead and mix that all around. And then what we need to do is we need to thicken it up, not too much, just a little bit. And this is a little bit of an art in order to get this to the right thickness. And the reason I say that is that when you're working with different cheeses, so as you know, I'm working with leftover cheese, some cheese it'll just all cook differently. So it's kind of really important to really sit by your pan and start on the thinner side, and then add more as you need. But if you do add too much, that's why we have the pasta water, so that we can thin it out. Because what you want to do is you want to make sure that all that creaminess gets inside the insides of the pasta for that creaminess. So I'm just going to start off. I'm going to add, I have about 2 tablespoons. That's my max in terms of the amount of flour that I'm going to use. I'm just going to go ahead and start adding a little bit to it until it gets to a consistency that I think that I can actually work with. So I'm probably going to add about half of it, which is about a teaspoon. And actually, if you really wanted to do it right, you can get a whisker and you can whisk all that flour right into your sauce. So as you can see here, that it's starting to thicken up pretty good. Not to a thickness of gravy, but just a thickness where you can actually sort of see the waves of your work that you're doing. So it doesn't stick around that long, but it sticks around just long enough where you can actually see where you've been. So if you think about water and you think about ripple effect, the fact that you can actually, it lingers for just a little bit, I think that's a pretty good consistency for you to start experimenting with. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add this Brie in. I have a feeling that this Brie is gonna actually thicken up a lot more than if I was to actually use something else like a cheddar. So we'll go ahead and see how that works out for us, and we'll start thickening that up. All right, so how cool is this Brie? Oh my gosh, it is just thickening it to a nice consistency. I'm super glad I did not use the entire bit of flour, because this Brie is thickening it to just the perfect, almost the perfect consistency in my sauce here. Just because I love cheese and I want to make sure that I get the value out of this cheese, I'm actually going to take some of this cheddar parm and I'm going to grate that right into my sauce. And then again, we're going to check it for consistency, make sure that it's thin enough that it's going to get inside the noodles, but thick enough that it is going to give us all the wonderful things that mac and cheese gives you, is that creaminess and that healthy dose of cheese. So there we go. Oh, that is awesome. Okay, so let me thicken that up. Now that I added that in there, I do feel like it's probably a little thicker than I would like, because this is, again, it's a cheddar parmesan's a little thicker, but no fear, because as I mentioned before, we have pasta water to sort of take it to the consistency that we want so that it rolls right into the pasta itself. So once I get that melted down, where I know everything is melted, I can be the judge of how thick I really want the sauce to be. And don't forget, when you're making macaroni and cheese, because all the sauce gets in all the little nook and crannies, you do kind of want it a little bit more runnier out the gate so that it kind of gets into all the noodles. So, while everybody wants that Velveeta-like, if you get Velveeta mac and cheese, which, by the way, nothing wrong with it. It is delicious if you're in a pinch. But when you're trying to make your homemade mac and cheese, keep in mind that it is different than Velveeta, so you're going to want to make sure that it's just a little bit thinner, because it will thicken up as you actually cook it. So, all right, look at that. And again, remember I said the pasta water acts as a binding agent, and you do want all of this deliciousness to actually bind into the pasta itself. Okay, so everything's just about melted. Got a few little chunks that I am working out here. And probably gonna add just a little bit more pasta water in here, just to make sure that all that cheese gets right into all the nooks and crannies that I need it to get into. All right, I have the sauce just where I want it. So now it's time to put in the macaroni. So I am going to, I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but I made about a half a bag, so about 8 ounces of macaroni to about the half a pound of Brie cheese that I used in these initial recipes. So we're gonna go ahead and mix that all in. And the goal here is I actually have the heat off. I'm not looking to cook this any further and render it down. What I'm really looking to do is get all that wonderful cheese inside all those holes of the pasta, because really the best part isn't the pasta, it's in the cheese that you're gonna go ahead and eat in a little bit. So we're gonna get that all in there. And looks like, so I want you to see how creamy this is. It's really creamy. It's not quite thin, but it's a little bit thicker, but it's allowing all of the the sauce to get inside the holes of that pasta, so it will actually hold all the sauce. So now that I got it where I want it, what I did is I have this is an 8x8 dish. I put a lot of non-stick spray into it, and now it's time to put this into this bowl because we're gonna stick it in the oven. All right, now we got the macaroni and cheese. We poured it into our greased baking dish. And so I actually have breadcrumbs that I'm gonna pour on top of it because it's really nice when it gets all nice and crispy on top. I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. And I'm gonna go ahead and pour this on, and I'm gonna go ahead and stick it in the oven. I cannot explain to you how amazing this sauce tastes, because you have to sneak a little taste in the process, right? Because you gotta make sure you're on the right track. And I wish that you could have been here with me when I did that little sneak peek, because it is amazing. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and put a nice little coating of breadcrumbs on it. And I was gonna say, I use Panko. I used to be a fan of the regular breadcrumbs, but ever since they came out with Panko and it's readily available, it just crisps up so much nicer. So I very rarely use the other breadcrumbs unless I'm making meatballs or something like that. And every time I want something a little bit crispy on the outside, I use the Panko. So it's ready to go into the oven. I'm going to stick it in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on how it starts to turn the color that I want it to turn. And then we'll be back and I'll show you the final result. All right, well, you know what? I'm so excited to try this. This is the Brie macaroni and cheese with pancetta, and oh my God, whoa. Wow. I would say some words that are probably not appropriate for the camera, but let's just suffice it to say it's freaking good. So, anyways, some parting thoughts while in quarantine. Luckily this week, I've had a really amazing time on Zoom with some really special people. And I will tell you that sometimes when you feel like you're alone, you're in quarantine, your friends are so amazing, and they can really lift your spirits up. They can remind you of how things were so awesome, and they can give you hope that things are going to be awesome moving forward. So I would encourage you, try to find things that bring comfort. So obviously, how does mac and cheese not bring you comfort? Honestly, right? It's amazing. And then, and find a way to spice it up. And the same thing with your friends. You may not be able to be with them physically, but find a way to spice it up. I promise you, you will find amazing ways to connect. And so I would highly encourage you. I'm Kathleen Nelson. This has been an episode of Kathleen Cuisine Quarantine Style. I hope you'll join me again.